Hey everyone, I am Sarthak Kaul, and this is True Calling. So, a lot of you have asked me about why I started this podcast, like what drove me to do this, and what are the kinds of people I am looking to bring on. My why. What's the why here, right? And, to understand my why, I think we need to go back to where it sort of all began, right? So I was born in a city called Gurgaon, and it's a city 30 minutes from Delhi. At that time was a very small tier 2 city. Delhi was sort of the main place where people would come, and our family moved there in 2002, 2003, which is when my brother was born. And my childhood has been a mixture of feeling extremely well connected and fitting in with society, and then having bouts of zero levels of resonance with people around me, and being able to relate. I was in a school up until fifth grade, which was a pretty big school. There were over 1,000 kids in our grade itself, and then I moved to a school where it went from 1,000 kids to 150 kids, and I was sort of the new one. It was fifth grade, and I didn't really know anyone around there. My parents thought that it was a very good decision to basically find, that school was a much higher quality education, and so I kind of just went with it, and well, I didn't really have any decision making there. Of course, like I'm in fifth grade, but when I moved there, I found myself to like not be able to fit in with people, and try to find my tribe of people. And so as time went on, I kind of found these few friends. One of my earliest friends, his name's Sanchit. Shout out to Sanchit. He's also here in the US right now, and him and I became really close, and we sort of like nerded out on all the physics and math, and that's sort of like, I thought that's all I wanted to do for the rest of my life, was to study physics and go deep into the research in quantum physics, and try to figure out the theory of everything, and all this very nerdy, wacky stuff that I genuinely enjoyed. But in eighth grade, I got to go to Switzerland to a research accelerator called CERN, and when I was interacting with the professors there, and the research scientists that are like trying to figure out the deepest, darkest questions of the universe, the Higgs boson, that's a God particle as we call it, was also discovered there. I kind of found myself again not fitting in, even though I was like, oh wow, like I love physics and I love quantum physics. I want to go into this field, but the people that I see that are in those fields are so much different than what I thought they would be like. And so it went back to this question of figuring out like, what is it that I actually want to do, or is physics something I actually want to do, or is there some other reason for why I was trying to do physics? I just kind of became very introspective earlier on, like maybe in eighth and ninth grade. When I was in eighth and ninth grade, I ended up getting pretty close to a friend of mine. He was living in the same neighborhood as I was, but he was 2 years older, and he has had a very big influence on my trajectory. This guy, he was early on, when we used to be in our neighborhood, we would play football together. For all the Americans, I mean soccer, and that's sort of like how I got interested in physics, was through him. He would tell me about these books that Michio Kaku, whoever knows Michio Kaku knows what I'm talking about, has written about physics, and then about Nima Arkani Hamid, and I really got interested in that field as a result of that. Now that I reflect back on that moment, it wasn't so much the physics side of it that I was so interested in. It was more so the kind of person that guy I'm talking about was, that I became interested in becoming. It was the fact that he was this guy who was inquisitive, he was curious, he was trying to challenge assumptions all the times to a fault, is what I was trying to gain from the time that I would spend with him, or trying to actually learn. And physics was just the means to see that the most. Physics became the vessel to see his inquisitiveness, and see his curiosity, and see his drive to discover things. And so that was a huge moment for me when I realized that I wasn't necessarily chasing a subject. It was kind of relieving to some extent that I wasn't chasing a subject. And on a much deeper level, I was chasing the kind of person that I actually wanted to become. And when I told this to my parents, it was a very different conversation. This in my head is like, okay, wow, I've just figured out something so much deeper about myself. It's like I want to be this kind of person as I'm growing up, and I listed out these qualities. I want to be kind. I want to be curious. I want to keep on like thinking about things from first principles and just sort of building my own assumptions and not just taking assumptions at face value. I want to find my truth. I was like, this is like the best thing that I've figured out about myself so far. Right? This is it. I mean, I just have to keep on doing these things and kind of will become that person. And I told this to my parents, and they sort of were almost taken aback by the fact that I was almost shifting blame on why I didn't want to pursue physics. So for them, it was like me taking the easy path of not pursuing physics, which is a hard field, and trying to find something else just because one day I decided I didn't want to do it. And I think that was a huge moment because I remember this conversation with my dad really well. I was in the first year of college in San Diego, and I had taken a few classes in physics, some intro classes, and one little bit more advanced undergrad class. And I saw the people I was around. I saw the professors and what they were up to and how they spent their time. And I saw the actual content of how it's taught. And none of those things actually intrigued me or interested me. And that was a big wake-up call for me. So I really thought about it, and I kind of came up to my parents and I called them once and I told them like, hey, I don't think that I want to pursue physics, and I'd rather just keep on looking for something else. And at that time, I remember my parents were very angry because of a sudden switch in their head that I'd made. I'd been contemplating it for a while, but the conversation came up almost suddenly for them. So anyways, what happened was they started asking me, well, then what do you want to do? And I had no idea of what I wanted to do. All I knew was what I didn't want to do. And to them, that was a very dissatisfying answer. And I understand where that comes from. I understand that they wanted me to have as much clarity about the steps that I'm taking and to actually come out of college as a more focused person, as someone that has specialized in something specific and has kind of seen it through and followed on with it and will continue to do it for the rest of their life in some ways. Because that's kind of what they grew up with, right? They grew up with this culture where you were pretty much doing the same job and same gig for 20, 30 years and then retiring. So the fact that their son, after a year of college, was deciding to just switch over to a different major or thinking about it was frightening for them. So what happened was I decided to switch from physics to math. And my reasoning at that time was I had taken math classes as a result of being in a physics major, and I would basically still be able to graduate in 4 years because I have taken basically the same amount of same kinds of classes that I would have had to take for physics than as compared to math. So for me, it was an easy transition, but even then, I knew what I was doing. I was trying to get out of this zone of being a physics major, but at the same time, appeasing some part of my parents so that they didn't feel like I'm suddenly switching over to something completely different that has no connection whatsoever to physics. So math became the middle ground where we shook hands. And so that's sort of, I majored in applied math. I ended up graduating a quarter early at UCSD. And I kind of, this was during COVID. It was like March 2021, and I was kind of done. But I mean, I kind of sped a little bit forward here. But the main takeaway for me there was that you need to be honest with yourself. And you might not be as honest with others, but it is important to be honest with yourself, because your decisions are a downstream effect of the amount of honesty you actually have in terms of the life you want to live and the kinds of actions you actually want to take. And if I was honest with myself at that time, that math actually wasn't the thing that I wanted to continue doing. And I kind of had an inkling that maybe I could go into more of the media side, or maybe I could go more into a little bit of the health and wellness, because I was always interested in health and wellness. I was always interested in talking to people, understanding niche concepts and from people. I really work off of other people's energies, and I really get a lot from just understanding topics that they are super interested in. One thing that I would have told my 19-year-old self is to be honest and not care so much about how, when you communicate your honesty to someone else, how they might go about it. Because in the end, this decision is much more important to you and your life than it is to anyone else's. So it's more important for you to choose the things that truly light you up and be honest about those things. And they could be the most niche things. And that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is that you are able to find an intersection of a lot of different things that are very niche to you because of the experiences that you've had. We are not meant to be a cookie cutter version of everyone else. There's certain proclivities we all have, and there's certain things that we completely don't want to do. And those things come together in the market to give you what really lights you up. What is your true calling, as I say. So for me, that conversation with my parents was a wake-up call to calling, to be able to think for myself and act on the things that I think are coming from me versus the things that are coming from someone else, like parents, close friends, society in general. So how did that lead me to start this podcast here? Right? In junior year of college, I had been taking a course in UCSD, which was a compulsory course for my specific college. Shout out to ERC. And it was called The Making of the Modern World. And it was this sort of humanities, sociology. It was a mixture of a lot of different subjects, but at the core of it, it was a writing related program, a 6-quarter sequence, I think, of the history of humanity from the beginning all the way to now. And we had, each quarter would build up on itself to keep on moving the timeline chronologically forward. And we would read a lot about different kinds of events that happened and how that shaped certain things. We had a lot of writing in it. And people hated it. In the moment, they absolutely despised it. And so did I. And it was only when I was a junior, which is when I had actually already completed the MMW Making of the Modern World course, that I realized the importance of it. And the way I realized the importance of it was through this one professor that we had, and his name was Professor Edmund Chang. Professor Edmund Chang has just been a fascinating character in college for me because one, he's one of the best storytellers I've met. Every single class, every single lecture was a nicely weaved story from one class to the other. And I just remember so many different topics from that class because of his enthusiasm and his energy and his care for history. So I pretty much, out of curiosity, asked him one day that I wanted to know more about what led him to go into history. And would he be open to just getting on a Zoom call and we just record a conversation and see how it goes? And he said, why not? And so during COVID, I think it was 2020, and I was in San Diego in a friend's apartment who had good Wi-Fi because we didn't have good Wi-Fi in our apartment. By the way, our apartment at that time was 8 dudes, 4-bedroom apartment. Absolute frat house vibes. Like it was the best year because it was all my closest friends in one single place, and it was COVID, so we were all stuck together in the best way possible. So I go to my friend's apartment, and we get on this Zoom call with Professor Chang, and I am recording this conversation, and I realize how much I just enjoy understanding where people come from and just empathizing with that story. And that conversation was an amazing conversation. He's lived in 5 different countries while growing up itself, been in boarding school, then he moved to the US. And in the US, he had a very unique way that education was actually taught in his school, it was a Socratic method where everyone would sit in a circle, and every conversation and learning would happen through question based learning. That's the whole Socratic method, is you are moving to questions rather than trying to think of the answers for every question. It was much more about diving into the problem that you are trying to solve. And I think that sort of like really impacted him, and that conversation really impacted me because it made me realize that I genuinely enjoy asking people questions about what led them to from one place to the other, and what are the connecting threads that have made them feel fulfilled in the things that they're doing. And that's sort of like something that I kind of felt like I had an intuitive sense for, is bringing that out in people. So I kind of didn't think too much about it. I just put it up on YouTube and kind of forgot about it in some ways. Like I shared it with a MMW Facebook group we had with other students, and people watched it and people shared some very kind comments about how much they enjoyed this conversation. And that's when I realized, like, okay, so these conversations are something that I just like to have anyways. I would talk like this with people on the street. I would talk like this with a stranger, like this anyone and everyone. I kind of go and try to understand the depth of the person, like what they are interested in, what drives them, and if it doesn't, how can I help? How can I bring more clarity in that process, right? So this became an impetus. It kind of drove me to start having more conversations after I heard other students talk about how this was just a great thing to listen to. So I ended up going to another professor that I had kind of seen on UCSD's website. So my family's from a place in India called Kashmir, and not a lot of people know about this place. And why would they? It's sort of the northernmost part of India. It borders China on one side, it borders Pakistan on the other, and it's sort of been a highly contentious place for the last few decades since India and Pakistan separated during independence in the 90s. It's contentious because both India and Pakistan are trying to claim the land, and so they've been fighting over it all these years. And for me, my family specifically, my parents have had a very traumatic experience with that whole situation, because when they were there and when their parents were there, my grandparents, that's when a lot of the Kashmiri pundits, which are like just Hindus that are in Kashmir, and they're specifically most of them are like Brahmins, and they're like priests. They were also told to leave Kashmir, otherwise they would basically just be shot by the militants and all that stuff there. It's like that's its whole thing. But the main thing was that Kashmir is something that kind of is very close to my heart because of our family history and upbringing, and that's sort of where our lineage comes from. And I saw this professor on campus at UCSD that had recently gone to Kashmir and stayed there for a couple of years. So she specifically studies ethnography. She's an ethnographer, which is just a fancy word for a traveler that just stays in one place for a couple of years to really understand and observe the culture, and then moves on and goes to the other place and writes about it and documents it, and sort of like a vlogger, but like a vlogger who stays extensively in a single place. And so she had been to Kashmir in the late teens, I think, and she had stayed there. And at that time, it was again had become a very contentious place. People were kind of like a lot of riots happening and all that. And she ended up staying for like 3 years, I think, there, and documented that journey. And I found that fascinating. I read the book that she wrote about Kashmir, and then I asked her, I was like, hey, you want to just join me on a conversation and understand, just like try to understand what drove you to not care about your life and the risks that you're taking to go the other side of the world in a highly militarized zone and stay there to observe how people are doing and what are their lives like. And those are the kind of things that really light me up, is just trying to understand what compels people to do the things that they do. Because there is no reason for someone to just go to a militarized zone and try to find insights on what's happening there when you know that you have a very high chance of being shot. So that's sort of like that conversation happened, and that was an amazing conversation again. But I was hesitant to post it because, again, it's such a close issue to my family that I didn't know how they would take it, again, because I cared about our relationship, my parents and I. So I never posted that. It's still there on my laptop. And that's sort of like what led me to have a series of conversations, basically, with different people. The next person I talked to was one of the first Indians to be in a federal prison in the US. And now he's running a successful business in hair care and wigs. They were like very different stories, very different conversations. But the common theme across all of them was that people were doing and being the way that they wanted to be. And that is in high demand, but in low supply in this world right now. A lot of people are wanting to find the things that light them up, but they either do not have clarity or are fearful of the things that light them up, trying them actually. So this whole podcast with True Calling is to help people gain clarity and inspire people. I'll take this from Simon Sinek, and inspire people to do the things that inspire them. And I just want to have a host of conversations with all kinds of people from all different backgrounds, with a common theme that they are pursuing things that light them up, and they're actually almost compelled to do the things that they're doing. So that's sort of a lot of my why, is to help others. And the reason the person I want to really help, it started off with the 18 to 25-year-old version of me that I wanted to help, because that's what he was thinking about, and that's what he was going through in college, is really feeling lost in what direction to take life. And only by moving and actually creating some action and talking to different kinds of people and understanding what they do, was he able to move forward and find the things that light them up. And if you already know what those things are, to hopefully show you that the path to that is definitely hard, but it's in grasp. It's not that far away. It is very possible, and people just like you are doing those things right now. The only thing that they have done differently, for the most part, is to kind of tune out the noise of society and the judgments of people, but also of themselves as much as possible. And even if they hear judgments from themselves or others, still act on the things that they want to do. And that's sort of the whole idea behind this podcast, is to help you act on those things. And, the next few conversations I'm having are, again, with people. One of the guys is in the data science space, and one of the other guys is in the CPG space, consumer packaged goods, and someone is doing non-profit work. The whole idea is that there are many ways to do the things that you're doing. There's not one single path to find the things that light you up. And I hope that that's, through the conversation I'm having, that gets cleared out more and more, and the conversations become more aligned with that intersection that I'm really trying to bring out. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of a lot of the why and a little bit about my background. What's next is I live in Austin, and Austin has become sort of a smaller mecca for a lot of the podcasters out here in the US. The Lexes of the world, the Chris's of the world. I actually really like this drink. It sort of feels like a mushroom tea, but like caffeinated, if that makes sense. This is a drink by Chris Williamson. So the place that I want to be is in Austin, because I heard Sahil Bloom, who's another person in this content space, talk about this question that we ask ourselves, right? Is it the journey or the destination? And he sort of said, I am in the phase of life right now where I don't think it's either the journey or the destination. It's the people. And it's the people that you surround yourself with that create the journey, and the journey creates the destination, and that the journey and the destination figure themselves out with the right people. So for me, it's been very important to be around the right people that are interested in the same things, are curious, are ambitious, are trying to make a dent in this universe, and really trying to make things happen. And these tend to be people that are, builders in different spaces or creatives, and they all want to make an impact here. And I joined UT Austin as a result of that. I wanted to be around other movers and shakers in Austin, and I think the college is ecosystem is a very strong place to find such people. So for me, the next stages are that I keep on meeting and talking to newer people that I come across in Austin and outside of Austin, but to bring forth more of these conversations on how they found their calling. Viggy, a friend of mine from my program at UT Austin, said this yesterday. He's like, you should have this thing called as like key callings, which is sort of like a key takeaway. And I want to bring out these key callings to others about understanding what are the common takeaways from this conversation. How can you tactically do something different from these conversations? And so the future of this I see right now is to, beyond the conversations, really create a community or create a space where people can try different things, get to meet others that want to try different things, and create these projects. Because I think we all feel paralyzed because we think that we need to find this big, massive thing that we can do forever. But I think the way that those things even start is by finding people that are interested in similar topics and just doing a small project with them. Like, let's not go too ahead of ourselves. All you need to really focus on is starting out small projects and just seeing them through. And the next level will just open up once you finish that project, or as you start doing that project and the people you kind of meet through that project. So I do want to make projects easier for other people to do, and passion projects easier for other people to do, by creating a space where people can try them out, and it feels low stakes, and it feels like you can actually continue on doing this, and kind of maybe even give some resources outside of just the knowledge, is like the people, the capital, all this stuff, sort of. So I'm really thinking about it from that standpoint, to build that sort of space, and I'm really early in that process, but I see that it is a very possible thing that I can do. So that's sort of a little bit about the background and the future of these things. And this is a very, very weird setting because I'm normally almost always with a guest. This is the first time I'm recording completely solo, and it feels very awkward. Feels like I need to put on a show, and it's just sort of me kind of going and internally telling myself like, hey, just keep on doing the things that naturally come up, and keep on sharing those things. So try my best here. The last thing that I want to say is that if you feel like you don't know where life is moving and you don't know what step to take, this next step, try just finding people around you that you feel like are doing or are the kind of person that you want to become. And just go up to them. If they're not around you, send them a message, LinkedIn, email. Just ask them, what led you to do XYZ things that you're doing? I really find that to be interesting, and I want to become more like you in this way. How can I do that? And I promise you, there are so many people in this world that want to help, and they especially want to help someone that they relate with because they were probably in the same space or same place as them. So I would urge everyone to just get curious. Get curious about yourself and the kind of person that you really feel like you want to keep on moving towards becoming. And find those people that might already be there in some ways. And just ask them, and they will help you out. I promise you that. I think that's about it for this one. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. And I'm so grateful that you guys are sending feedback on the different videos. It genuinely lights me up to hear something, because otherwise it does really feel like I'm just having this conversation in this room, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't go beyond this. When you come back with thoughts, comments, and very thoughtful feedback on how I can do this better and what you learned from this and how you've changed something in your life through this process, it really drives me, because it shows me that it's actually tangibly doing something to someone. I really appreciate every one of you that has sent me a message about just continuing to go. So I can bet you that I'll keep on doing this, and I hope you stay tuned for the next few conversations. Thank you so much.